10,000 years ago, there were no states, no borders, kings, professional armies, or cities to conquer. But near the shore of a lake in what is now Kenya, a group of people died at the hands of other people. And that creates an uncomfortable question. If civilization did not exist yet, what were they already killing one another for? Maybe for water? For food? For territory? For people? Or maybe the reason was so ordinary that we will never know it. But the bones found at a place called Nataruk left us something more important than a motive. They forced archaeologists to ask again a question that concerns the entire history of our species. What came first, civilization or war? Today, Nataruk is a dry, harsh landscape west of Lake Turkana. But about 10,000 years ago, the picture was completely different. The lake was much larger. Nearby were shallow lagoons, marshy areas, trees, and green corridors. There was fresh water, fish, animals, plants, materials for making tools. For a hunter-gatherer, this was not just a beautiful landscape, it was a supermarket, a gas station, and an apartment all in one, just without a checkout. And that is exactly why land like this could be extremely valuable. The people who lived here did not have farms in the modern sense. They did not build stone fortresses. But that does not mean they had nothing to lose. Food could be gathered and stored. Water might have been available only in certain places. Good fishing and hunting grounds mattered. Pottery was already appearing at sites in the region. And suddenly, the simple picture of a world where mobile hunter-gatherers owned nothing and therefore supposedly had no reason to fight becomes much less simple. In 2012, researchers began finding human remains here. Not one orderly grave, not a cemetery where bodies had been carefully placed in the ground. These people were lying where the ancient environment had left them thousands of years ago, some face down. And the more bones archaeologists uncovered, the harder it became to explain this as ordinary death. At Nataruk, researchers documented the remains of at least 27 people. 12 skeletons were relatively complete and preserved in positions that allowed the circumstances of death to be studied in greater detail. In 10 of those 12, researchers described injuries they associated with violence. And this is where the story becomes much darker. One man's skull had severe damage. Inside his skull remained a small fragment of obsidian, black volcanic glass that can be shaped into extremely sharp projectile points. And that was not the only trace of a weapon. Other remains showed injuries that researchers associated with projectile weapons, sharp objects, and powerful blows from blunt weapons. So we are not looking at one person who argued with a neighbor and took a single hit. We see different types of trauma in several people. And that changes the scale of the event. Among the dead were men. But not only men, there were women. Near the adults, researchers also found the remains of children. One of the most disturbing finds was the skeleton of a woman who, according to the researchers' interpretation, was in the later stages of pregnancy. Fetal bones were preserved near her. The position of the arms of several individuals also led researchers to suggest that they may have been bound. The word here matters, may. After 10,000 years, bones do not give us a video recording of the event. They leave traces, and archaeologists try to understand which story best explains those traces. But if the original interpretation is correct, the attackers did not simply clash with the armed men of another group. The violence affected the whole group, and then our main question returns. Why? The first obvious answer is food. There were far more resources around Nataruk than you might imagine from looking at the landscape today. Fish, game, plant foods, water. If one group controlled an especially productive area, another group might have wanted it. But then another possibility appears. Maybe it was not only about what could be eaten today. Pottery meant that some resources could be stored. And the moment people have something they can accumulate, something else appears too. The possibility of taking it. That does not prove that the attack at Nataruk was a robbery. We do not know the motive, but now we already have a possible resource, a possible conflict, and a group of people who died violently. Maybe the reason was territory. For a mobile group, territory does not necessarily mean a fence with a sign that says private property. It can mean knowing where water can be found during a drought, where animals pass, where fish can be caught, where stone for tools can be found. Losing access to such a place might not mean losing real estate. It might mean losing the chance to survive the next season. But there is another possibility. Maybe resources were not the main reason at all. Human groups can come into conflict over revenge, earlier encounters, social relationships, or simply because meeting an unfamiliar group under certain conditions is perceived as a threat. And this is where Nataruk stops being only the story of one tragedy. Because for a long time, debates about the origins of war included a very attractive explanation. At first, humans lived in small mobile groups. Then they became sedentary. Then agriculture appeared, land, stores of food, property, social inequality, settlements. And only then did people truly have something worth fighting over on a large scale. The logic seems almost perfect. There is property and there is a reason to defend it. There are fields, there is territory, there are settlements. There is something to capture. There is power. There is someone who can order others to go and die. Humanity invents bureaucracy, and somewhere nearby, apparently, the Department of War opens immediately. But Nataruk stands in the middle of this elegant model and behaves very inconveniently, because these people lived before states and long before professional armies. And if the group at Nataruk really was attacked by another group, it means that the capacity for deadly organized intergroup violence required neither a king, nor a flag, nor a tax system. All it took was two groups of people and a reason for one of them to decide that the other was standing in the way. But this is exactly where we have to stop. Because the story of Nataruk did not end the scientific debate. It ignited it. After the study was published, other specialists questioned part of the interpretation. They asked, did all of these people really die in one event? Were some of the bone injuries definitely inflicted around the time of death? Or could they have formed later through pressure from sediment and other natural processes? If bodies accumulated here at different times, then the picture of one mass attack becomes much weaker, and that is a serious argument. The authors of the original study responded to the criticism and argued that the alternative explanation did not fit the total body of evidence. So today the correct version of the story is not this. At Nataruk, archaeologists found the place where the first war began. We do not know that. And in general, it would be strange to expect archaeology to find the exact first war. Violence does not leave us a calendar with a note saying, "Congratulations, today humanity officially invented war." Archaeologists see only a tiny fraction of what actually happened. Bodies disappear. Bones break down. Sites are flooded. Landscapes change. Thousands of events leave no traces that we are capable of finding. There are also even older archaeological signs of severe interpersonal and intergroup violence at other sites. So the importance of Nataruk is not that it gives us a date for the birth of war. Its importance is something else. Here we have a very ancient group of hunter-gatherers, among whom researchers found an unusual concentration of injuries consistent with violent death. And if the interpretation of a mass intergroup attack is correct, then one of the darkest patterns of human behavior already existed about 10,000 years ago, before empires, before large cities, before standing armies, possibly even before many of the things we're used to blaming for the emergence of war. But then one final question remains. Why exactly did the people of Nataruk die? For water? Maybe. For food? Maybe. For good territory? Very possible. For stored resources? Also possible. Because of an old revenge or conflict that left no trace behind? We cannot rule it out. The most honest answer is that we do not know, and we probably never will. But strangely, that uncertainty makes Nataruk even more important, because 10,000 years separate us from these people, yet the reasons that might have turned one group against another sound far too familiar. Resources, territory, fear of outsiders, revenge, competition. We do not need a time machine to understand those words. We just do not know which one was the right one that day beside the lagoon. At the beginning, we asked what came first, civilization or war? Nataruk does not give us a final answer about when war began, but it destroys the comfortable certainty that humans first needed to invent cities, borders, and armies before mass violence could happen. Maybe civilization did not invent our ability to wage war. Maybe it simply made us much better at it.